Listen up. The White House is now considering a $1 trillion package to combat the disastrous effects of the coronavirus on our economy. $250 billion of that would be used for direct payments to Americans. But one part of the plan is already drawing a whole lot of sharp criticism. Industry bailouts, with roughly $50 billion going to help the airline industry alone. Joining us now, Mark Cuban. He is the owner of the Dallas Mavericks, the chairman of AXS TV. And Todd Graves is here. He's the founder and CEO of Raising Cane's Chicken Fingers. He was part of the White House's call with restaurant executives yesterday. Mayor Michael Tubbs is with us of Stockton, California, and Ben White. Great to have him back, Politico's chief economic correspondent. Mr. Cuban, we must go to you first. In the last week, you have done so much for local businesses in Texas, even last night, urging people to reach out for small business loans. But you've also sharply criticized this idea of corporate bailouts. Explain.
Well, I'm not against corporate bailouts. I think we're in a new normal right now. Life is different. And so our number one priority should be supporting companies who retain their employees. We have to do all we can to prevent firings and layoffs. And if that means bailouts, subsidies, special price loans, I'm all for it. But when we negotiate those deals, we have to be very cognizant that this is a unique opportunity for us to do something that addresses income inequality. And what I said was anything that we do that benefits an executive at a company, we need to do the exact same thing to benefit the hourly worker or the lowest paid worker at that company. 2 years from now, hopefully, when we're looking back on all this, we'll say, why don't we use this as a chance to help the everyday worker? And I just want to get ahead of that. And so, we this is the time to address it.
Do we need to look more closely at what kind of industries we give assistance to? Because when you look at the airline industry, one of the reasons they don't have cushion is because they've spent so much in the last few years on corporate buybacks. Or the cruise industry, they're not paying big U.S. corporate taxes like a lot of companies here are. They're domiciled in places like Liberia and Panama.
Yeah, look, the two different questions there. One, the fact that they did buyouts, if you just say we're going to exclude them, you're just killing all the people who work for them. You're just guaranteeing they'll all lose their jobs. So this isn't about them. This is about supporting. This is about helping companies retain their employees so that you can help the employee. Now, what you do as part of that, since the government is reducing, if not eliminating, the risk in their operations for some period, you need to make sure that if an exec is awarded a stock option or a warrant or granted stock, whatever you do for them, proportionally, you do the same thing for everybody else on the payroll. That is the key to making this work. I'm not dogmatic against bailouts at all, or loans or subsidies at this point in time, because we're in a new world that we've never seen before. But we need to prioritize everybody being supported equally. We need to use this as an opportunity to reduce income inequality. That needs to be job number one. Get people to keep their jobs and help lift people up where we can, because we need, by those people retaining their jobs, they're going to help support us when hopefully we can get the economy stabilized and moving forward, hopefully just 6 months from now.
This is a time when we could be moving to more inclusive, conscious capitalism. Todd, you've got nearly 500 locations. You've got drive-throughs at those locations, so people can drive up, pick up food. Some chain restaurants have apps. You had the benefit of being part of the White House call yesterday. The accommodations that are being made, are they going to help small mom-and-pop restaurants that don't have drive-throughs or apps?
Well, unfortunately, the president wasn't able to get to that on our brief call yesterday. The call involved about 23 of some of the largest restaurant companies in the country, and also the International Franchise Association. And he was concerned and making sure that some of these largest restaurant companies were ready to feed the public food-safe products and also practicing social discipline. Now, he did say this next economic package, he didn't get into any details on that, but he did say that our industry is going to like it a lot. I can't remember exactly what his quote was, but he said that we would like it. So anxiously awaiting that. Companies like us that were on that call and that do have drive-through and that do have large credit lines, we're going to make it through this. And my heart goes out to these small businesses. Small business, we all know, is the backbone of our economy. The restaurant sector is a huge part of that. I think we're one of the top employers in the country. And so I started my business 25 years ago having a commercial fish in Alaska and reconstructed my first restaurant. I know how hard it is to start a restaurant. And then I know how hard it is to keep a restaurant going. A restaurant, most people don't know this, but a restaurant has to make small margins is what we do off of very large volumes. And a lot of these smaller restaurants, independent restaurants, they live, they go through all their volumes. They might make 5 cents on a dollar, and that's before tax, right? And then you have taxes. They live week to week, month to month, but they do a great job of serving the public food safe product and also taking care of their employees. Huge sector here. So they are going to need help. I have been on the phone for the last 2 weeks with countless restaurants, both large and small, franchise, independents. And these restaurants that don't have this reserved cash, they don't have this access to credit lines, they're terrified. They're being good and strong leaders, but they're having to furlough employees. And this is happening. I'm on the phone last night, midnight, and more people tell me I have to do this tomorrow. And so all these employees not having income coming in, obviously, they need their needs. These businesses will go out of business. So they do need help right now. They do need a lot of help.
Mayor Tubbs, let's talk about that help, because this idea has now been floated to write a check to the American people. Universal basic income is something you've actually done in Stockton. So you've got experience. Tell us how it works.
Well, absolutely. I think, as you've heard from those on this segment, just throughout, that American people are really suffering during this pandemic. Right now, in America, before coronavirus, 1 in 2 Americans cannot afford one $500 emergency, and that's going to be exacerbated as folks are having to not go to work, being laid off, et cetera. So in Stockton, we piloted a basic income demonstration where families have been given $500 a month for the last 18 months. And what we've seen is that folks are using the money to pay for food, pay for utilities, to take care of family members, et cetera. And given the crisis that we're in now, I think it's incumbent on Congress and on the president to make sure we get checks out and we bail out the American people in a way that's fast and immediate and also lasting. It can't be a one-time payment. It has to last at least as long as this pandemic, because again, the majority of Americans were in an economic crisis before this crisis, which means this crisis is further exacerbating kind of cracks in our economy.
Mr. Cuban, your point of view on this cash payment to Americans?
Not a fan. And I'll tell you exactly why. I think, to Todd's point, the restaurants that are about to furlough people, we need to get cash in their pockets first, with the requirement being that they retain those employees and continue to pay them, even if it means government UBI for employees paid through their employer, right? So I'm not a fan of UBI just for everybody. But if that UBI goes through the employer so they can retain people and those small restaurants can stay open, I'm a fan of that. For those people who are on public assistance, you just lost your job and you're now getting public assistance, I have no problem giving them more money, giving them a bonus check, if you will, because you've just started on public assistance, increasing the amount of money for those who are already on public assistance. But those are two independent buckets. And I think the number one priority has to be helping the folks that Todd's referring to, those small restaurants that are living hand to mouth, all companies that are living hand to mouth, because we want to keep people employed. And if the government is writing checks to employers and they're passing that money through as a requirement to their employees and keeping them employed, even if they're just sitting around doing nothing, that's where I would prioritize that money going. So I'm not a fan of general UBI, but effective UBI I'm okay with.
Todd, what is your point of view? Because an argument right now to write these checks to the American people is also to keep them safe. We've got a lot of low-wage workers that aren't losing their jobs, but they don't have paid leave. So maybe they have kids at home, or maybe they're feeling a little bit sick. And if the option is go to work and get a paycheck that can put food on my table, or stay home and take an extra precaution, a lot of people are going to go to work.
Absolutely, right? And so it'll help if these people do have income, right, if they're sick. And if people are sick, people need to stay home. And if they end up having symptoms for the coronavirus, they need to self-quarantine. And that's the only way we're going to stop this pandemic from spreading. I'm in Mark's camp from the business perspective, going through the employers and making that pass on to the employees. And so that is for loss of income if you're out and you're sick and you have to stay home. That money should flow through the employers and go directly to their employees.
Michael, tell us what it's like in Stockton right now.
Well, I would say I disagree vehemently for a couple of reasons. Number one, there's a lot of folks who are working in the gig economy, DoorDash, Lyft drivers, et cetera, that are impacted by the economic recession that's going to be caused by this pandemic. So I think the federal government has capacity and the mandate to do both, that we have to support our small businesses, absolutely, but our small businesses are nothing without the people who actually make them work and who deliver the food and things of that sort, who may not be directly employed by the employer. And just last night, in Stockton, we shut down all our restaurants, we shut down our bars, we shut down all our entertainment venues, and people are really hurting. And I definitely think there's a role to make sure we support small business owners, but we have to ensure that the American people are okay. Because again, before this crisis, 1 in 2 Americans cannot afford a $400 emergency. And I'm not sure how during a crisis when folks aren't working, where business isn't as good, how we expect folks to subsist and survive this economic catastrophe without some sort of an income floor in a way that's investing directly in folks that kind of help make sure our economy keeps going.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.